Really impressive performance from Elise Mertens. Up against a player in really good form at the moment, who started well, but Elise Mertens does not lose first-round matches.
4 days. That was all it took for one player to completely rewrite everything people thought they understood about women's tennis. And then just when the story felt like it had settled, 4 more days arrived and flipped the entire narrative upside down in a way almost nobody saw coming. But the truth is, what's trending right now is not even the most important part of this story. Because what happened to Alex this week in Bad Hamburg was never a collapse, never a warning sign, and certainly not a step backward. It was something far more layered, far more complex, and far more fascinating than any simple label could explain. And to understand why, you cannot start in Bad Hamburg. You cannot even start in Berlin. You have to go all the way back to the moment before the world knew her name at all, because the player who walked off court today is not the same player who stepped onto a grass court just 10 days ago with everything to prove. Somewhere along the way, she became something else entirely, and the scoreboard has no way of telling you that story. Let's set the scene. Berlin grass season. The stretch of the tennis calendar where reputations are either made or exposed, where fast courts, low bounces, and razor-thin margins separate the contenders from the rest. And the draw was no soft landing. Donovic, Elena Rybakina, Alina. Say those names slowly because each one carries a different kind of threat. Bencic had just conquered Queen's Club, arriving in peak form on this surface. Rybakina, a Wimbledon champion, not a finalist, not a contender, but a champion who has already reached the summit of the sport. And Svitolina, the kind of competitor who doesn't just play matches. She drags you into survival, forcing you to earn every point in a way that breaks most players before it ever breaks her. Alex faced all 3 back to back to back. And she didn't just win, she dominated. She dictated. She made 3 of the strongest players on the planet look like they were chasing shadows the entire time. And suddenly, a conversation that had been quietly building for months detonated on a global scale. Who is Alex, where did she come from, and how far can she actually go? But here is where it gets even more interesting. Because before Berlin, there was already something there. A slow build. A quiet rise. The kind of trajectory that hints at greatness but hasn't yet found its defining moment to make the entire world stop and watch. That is the brutal reality of life on the WTA Tour for a young player. You can be gifted, you can be disciplined, you can spend years building your game, and none of it matters until you beat someone the tennis world respects. That is the silent rule of tennis. Nothing matters in practice when real pressure arrives there. It does not matter what coaches say about your potential behind closed doors. What matters is what happens when the crowd watches and points truly start counting there. And the issue with being a young player, especially one still assembling her complete game, is that the WTA is filled with veterans who have already seen every version of every trick on tour for many years. Players who have spent over a decade on tour and know exactly how to dismantle someone who has not yet learned to hide their weaknesses under pressure. Berlin was the moment where Alex showed the world she could rise beyond flashes now. She was not electric only briefly. She was elite across whole matches versus elite competition. That is something entirely different. That is a leap most young players take years to make. She achieved it in 1 week on grass. But then something happened that nobody really talks about enough. And this is the part of the story that gets overlooked every single time there is a big result to discuss. Success carries a cost. Not in some abstract philosophical sense. In a very specific, very physical, very measurable way. Think about what winning really means in grass season. It means you do not go home. It means instead of recovering, you pack your bag and move to the next city. It means instead of sleeping, you're doing press. Instead of resting your legs, you're doing more interviews, more social media, more everything that comes with suddenly being the name everyone wants to discuss about. And on top of all that come the matches themselves. 3 matches against 3 elite players on a surface that punishes every movement not perfect there. Grass demands explosiveness. It demands quick starts, sharp lateral cuts, split-second decisions on balls stay low and skid through. Your legs don't simply get tired on grass. They get specifically, precisely, deeply tired in ways that affect timing before they ever affect effort itself now. Alex gave everything she had in Berlin. Every single thing. And then she had to go to Bad Hamburg and do it against someone who has spent years learning exactly how to take advantage of opponents who've already emptied the tank. Elise Mertens. Now stop right there, because if you're not a hardcore tennis fan, that name might not immediately spike your heart rate there. And that's precisely the problem. That's precisely why Mertens has been among the most dangerous players on the WTA Tour for the better part of a decade now. She doesn't need your fear. She doesn't need you to respect her when walking onto court. She just needs you to be 1% less sharp than yesterday, 1% less explosive, 1% less precise than today. Because Mertens is a player who turns 1% into a scoreline. She is a surgeon, patient, methodical, completely unbothered by momentum. She doesn't try to beat you quickly. She lets you beat yourself. She keeps pushing it back again and again, relentlessly returning pressure back in. She redirects. She resets. She absorbs your pace and returns it at a slightly different angle, turning you into the chaser instead of the leader, reacting instead dictating now. And as you realize what just happened, the set is already gone away. Alex is a player who thrives when she sets the tempo herself up. She takes the ball early. She attacks the middle. She creates pressure through sheer speed and heavy aggression in ground strokes alone there. None of that aggression works the way it should when the player across the net is built specifically to slow everything down and force mistakes first over and over again relentlessly there now. And that collision between Alex's aggressive style and Mertens's suffocating consistency was always destined to create friction. The question was how much friction exactly. And the answer, given everything Alex had already endured, proved more than enough to decide the match outcome there in full. From the opening game, something immediately felt different out there today now. The Alex who carved through Berlin was still right there inside her. The weapons were still there. The serve was still a weapon. The forehand remained capable of winning free points, but there was a subtle quality in her ball striking, slightly behind where it had been before tonight under pressure felt. And against Mertens, slightly behind becomes a 5-alarm fire because she reads it immediately. These veterans always do. They spend years learning to sense exactly when an opponent's timing is off by fractions slightly. And once Mertens identifies it, she does what she always does. She makes Alex play one more ball, then another right after that. She turns every rally into a negotiation, constantly changing terms at the very last second there now. Alex would load up for a big forehand, and Mertens would redirect just enough to pull her out of her hitting zone. Alex would look to step inside and take control, while Mertens goes behind her with casual precision there. Every single time Alex was about to seize the rally by the throat, Mertens slips away and resets. That physical cost of chasing every ball, of constantly being half a step late, of doing just a little more work than you want, builds in ways the scoreboard cannot show, and it shows in time today now. You can see it in the body language, the longer exhales between points, the way shoulders tighten, but Alex keeps fighting through it, still refusing to break down there. That needs to be said clearly now. This was not a performance where she checked out, gave up, or collapsed mentally there. She competed. She always competes. But fighting with a depleted engine against a player who specializes in running engines dry feels almost impossible task now. And today it proved to be exactly that. So match ends. Mertens wins. And immediately the internet does what the internet always does again. It turns a layered, complicated story into a blunt headline. Alex, first round exit. But that headline never even begins to hold what really happened. 6 weeks ago, Alex going out in the first round of a grass court event wasn't news at all. That isn't criticism, that's just the landscape. The tennis world wasn't glued to her matches, waiting to gasp at early exits. She was a rising talent, dangerous, electric, but not yet the kind of name that forces global reaction when she falls to a seasoned veteran on a surface she's still learning to master. Today, that same first-round loss echoes everywhere. It's being broken down. It's being debated. It's being pushed by outlets that barely acknowledged her name a month ago. And that shift right there is Berlin's real impact, because you don't get discussed globally for losing unless people are already locked in when you're winning. The scrutiny is proof she's arrived. The attention is proof she's changed. Losing in the first round stings. But losing in the first round as someone the tennis world now treats as must-watch television, that's a different kind of pain. It comes with something attached. Recognition. And now the grass court season bends toward the only stage that truly matters. Wimbledon, the cathedral. Where grass court tennis stops being just sport and becomes something almost spiritual. Where the lines feel wider, the silence feels heavier, and history presses down on every match like a physical presence as you walk through the gates. And Alex is heading there. Not as a hopeful underdog chasing a breakthrough if the draw opens up. She's going there as a player who has already proven she belongs in conversations with the elite on this surface. That's a seismic shift. The kind that normally takes years to build. She did it in a week. Think about what that does to a draw. Think about what that does to the players on the other side of the net. Before Berlin, a second-round Wimbledon meeting with Alex would feel manageable on paper. You'd study her patterns. You'd draw up a plan. But you wouldn't feel that tight pressure in your chest that comes from facing someone you truly fear. After Berlin, that feeling is there now. Coaches are sharper in their preparation. Tactics are being dissected more carefully. She isn't someone anyone overlooks anymore. That's both a reward and a problem because when the entire field prepares for you, the element of surprise, the weapon that carried her early run, starts to disappear. The next step is learning how to win when everyone is ready. That's the real test in professional tennis. Anyone can surprise once. When they're fully prepared, winning separates good players from champions truly. Yet here's the truth about Alex, constantly buried beneath the noise of results and headlines everywhere now. There exist 3 victories no ranking system and no first-round exit can ever truly touch still. Dinovic Elena Rybakina Elena Svitolina. Those results remain permanent. They exist inside the record books forever. When a young player doubts herself and every player doubts themselves because this sport is brutal, she can look at those names. She can recall exactly what it felt like to serve out a match against Wimbledon champion there. Exactly what it felt like when Rybakina's ground strokes came at her like cannon fire and she didn't flinch at all. Exactly what it felt like to beat Svitolina in the kind of mentally grinding match that used to end young players' confidence for months without hesitation anymore there. That experience lives inside her now, not as memory but as knowing there. There is a difference between believing you can do something and knowing you've already done it. Berlin gave her the knowing, and that is something Mertens could not take away. Bad Hamburg. It was already somewhere Mertens couldn't reach. So now you see full picture, not just result, not just scoreline, the full picture now. A young player who spent years being described in the future tense, who always heard words like potential and someday, and eventually went to Berlin and made every single one of those words obsolete. She replaced them with something real, something that can be looked up, something that other players are now being asked about in their press conferences there. And then she went to Bad Hamburg, physically depleted, mentally heavy from the weight of a week that changed her career. And she faced exactly the kind of opponent designed to expose cracks that exhaustion creates there. And she lost, and it still didn't undo anything because trajectories don't reverse in single match there. They only reveal themselves over time. And the trajectory Alex is on right now is one of the most exciting in women's tennis. Not because of the ranking, not because of the numbers, because of the way she's been winning, because of the quality of the moments she's been producing, because of what it feels like when you watch her play and you sense that you're witnessing something that is still becoming what it's going to be. And that's the thing that makes Wimbledon feel so different this year when you think about her specifically. She isn't going there to surprise anyone. She isn't going there to steal a round. She isn't going there with that quiet hope that maybe things will click and maybe she'll get lucky with the draw and maybe she'll sneak into second week there. She's going there as a contender. Not because the media is calling her that, not because the rankings say so, but because the best players on grass in the world have already stood across the net from her this season and come away knowing that she is genuinely, legitimately dangerous. That knowledge spreads. It travels through the locker room quietly and quickly, and it changes the energy in the building whenever her name appears on the draw sheet. There's a version of this story where Berlin was the peak, where that incredible week becomes the thing she looks back on as the first taste of something great but never quite matched. Players have those stories. They have that week that defined a season but didn't define a career. But there's another version. A version where Berlin was actually just the first visible proof of something that was always going to arrive eventually. Where the week wasn't the ceiling. Where it was just the doorway. and the entire tennis world is going to find out which version is true. Starting very soon at the All England Club. What makes it impossible to look away is that both versions are believable, both are plausible, and only one of them is going to happen. So when she walks out onto that Wimbledon grass for the first time this year, carrying everything that Berlin built and everything that Bad Hamburg reminded her still needs work, there won't be a single person watching who is entirely sure what comes next, including Alex. And that uncertainty, that electric, trembling, wide-open uncertainty about what this player is truly capable of, is the most compelling thing in tennis right now. Not the rankings, not the draws, not the statistics, just the question. The big, beautiful, terrifying question that Berlin created and Bad Hamburg hasn't answered. How good can she actually become? Because for the first time in a long time, the answer feels like it might genuinely surprise all of us. Genuinely surprise all of us.